All right. All right. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kevin Mills with Action Coach of Lake Houston, and today we're talking about virtual leadership, how to be an effective leader no matter where your people work. And we'll certainly have some time for Q&A at the end of the webinar, so feel free to type in your questions into the chat, and we'll cover those at the end. So a quick overview of what we'll discuss today is one, how to lead differently in a remote work environment, understanding that leadership is more about influence than it is command, and especially in a virtual environment. We'll also learn about the 3O model and the remote leadership model and how these two models really work together in a leadership process as we go through leading our teams and providing them guidance and direction. And finally, we'll also talk about how to maintain a servant leadership mindset in our work environment. So I want to start off by giving a quick survey. And the question we're going to ask is, where's your mindset today? So let me start this poll, and I'm going to launch, hopefully it'll show up on your screen. And it's a completely anonymous poll, multiple choice, select one of kind of where is your mindset right now today. And then I'll share the results of that once we get finished with all of the entries. So just go ahead and put in, where's your mindset? And while you're doing that, it's so important for us to remember as leaders, as business owners, mindset is probably the most important thing for us to manage and have an understanding of where it is throughout the day. So let me go ahead and share the results. It looks like we've got a spread across the board, inspired, optimistic, and concerned. So certainly that makes sense. Where we are today, there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of uncertainty in the economic marketplace. So let's jump right in to the virtual leadership information. We're really going to cover 19 different rules that we need to consider as we lead our teams that are working remotely. And we have to remember that distance and location shouldn't distract us from the fundamentals of leading people. It's first and foremost still about the basic principles of leadership. Making sure we're asking these 4 common questions. And these are common questions we ask ourselves in a normal work environment, but they become even more important working virtually. Number 1, how do we know people are really working when we can't see them? We're not around them every day. How are people getting enough social interaction? Are they, because they're kind of on an island? Are we getting good feedback when we need to consider options, making decisions? And can we be as effective as when we were co-located together? All great questions to ask, and we'll walk through and understand how we can answer and address each of these. So rule number 2 is leading remotely requires us to lead differently. And 80%, is a study done, 80% of white collar managers have at least one direct report who works in a different location. So there are 2 major repercussions for leaders. One is that the methods of communication have changed, and the methods need to change to enable us to succeed in a different way with our virtual teams. And number 2, the leader's sense of isolation has increased. That sense of isolation is no longer simply an emotional isolation from their team. It now includes physical isolation. So having an awareness as a leader that has happened, and it's a new normal, in understanding how to address that effectively. The act of leadership has not changed that much, right? And we need to do the same things we've done in the past, but do them in a different way with a different set of tools. So that leads us to rule number 3, working remotely changes the interpersonal dynamics that's happening. So being seen is critical in leadership, and it always suffers in a remote setting because just naturally we are not going to be seen, nor are people going to be seen. Virtual communication changes our interpersonal communication. We lose that face-to-face, and we lose that nonverbal feedback. And if you've studied communication, you know 80% of communication is nonverbals. About probably 10%, 15% is tone of voice, and only 5% is the actual words we speak. So you can see where when you lose the 80% of the ability to communicate, the effectiveness drops quickly. So we have to make sure our message is easily understood. We have to find other ways to receive these critical cues from our team and from our audience. So if you think about a good example of a bad communication experience is when you've sent a text and it's taken the completely wrong way, and the person that received that text responds with something that you didn't expect because they read that text differently than how you intended to send it. They only got 5% of the message in a text. Rule number 4 is around technology. We need to use technology as a tool. Don't allow it to be a barrier. So we've got 3 gears here that are shown on the slide. The largest gear is around the most fundamental part of leading, and it's based on the fundamental leadership behaviors and principles. That largest gear really doesn't change. The other 2 gears, inner working gears, work together to propel remote work. And so that second gear, they call it the medium-sized gear, represents the most important difference when leading remotely, where leaders may not be comfortable using tools and technology which can impact the effectiveness of your leadership. And then the smallest gear, the third gear, is skill and impact. And it represents the simplest concept but can cause the biggest problems. Choosing the appropriate tool is critical to your effectiveness in leading. Rule 5, leading requires a focus on the 3O model. What do the 3 O's represent? Number 1, outcomes. We need to lead with purpose so that we reach a desired and common goal, a common outcome. Barriers to that are isolation, the lack of environmental cues that we're getting, and there's a lower repetition of the message we're giving. And typically that message is only delivered once instead of multiple times because of the remoteness. Number 2 is others. Lead with and through your people. And it's that servant leadership principle that comes to play here. You are more influential when you focus on others, and team members are more engaged when you focus on them. And then the third O is ourselves. And what are our beliefs and assumptions? What do we believe we are? Who you are and how you lead is important wherever your people may work. So it's interesting here that you'll see that ourselves comes after outcomes and others. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but just notice how that comes third in the 3O model. Now we look at rule 6. Leading successfully requires achieving goals of many different types. 1, organizational outcomes. Make sure we have clear targets and frequent discussion of those targets and goals with the team. Next is team outcomes. People must know how what they do fits into the working success of the team. So they need to understand their piece of the puzzle and how it contributes to the team's outcome and success. And finally, personal and individual outcomes. Develop both goals and expectations for each individual team member. Establish rules for working together. Communicate the process of how they can get support as they need it. And describe for them what good communication looks like. Demonstrate it first and then describe it so it's very clear. It's important for us to remember working remotely means your team can feel like they're living on an island. There's less interaction with you, there's less interaction with other team members, and there's definitely less sense of belonging and team in that environment. So it's easier for the team members to lose sight of the big picture and their role in contributing to the common goal of the team. So it's important to develop electronic dashboards, KPIs, and metrics, and have online reporting of progress reports for projects and activities, so that both the leader and the team member are clear in understanding progress and tracking toward the common goals. Rule 7, focus on achieving goals, not just setting them. And make sure the goals that you set are SMART goals. You may have heard of this acronym before. SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, results-oriented, and time-bound. All 5 of those components should be part of each goal you're creating for your team. Ask the question, what are the quantity components of the work described? How does time factor into the success of the work being done? And how is quality of the work determined, and how are we going to measure quality? So again, as we discussed earlier, make all of the metrics and KPIs, put them into an electronic dashboard, make them visible to your team, have them contribute to developing the SMART aspects of the goals, and this will help you avoid surprises when they miss a goal because of that lack of communication, and it'll create certainly a common goal for the team to make sure they're marching toward this in the same direction. Also important to set measures in smaller chunks so that you can be more effective in identifying and addressing delays or risks in activities that are being done. Rule number 8, coach your team regardless of where they work. So coaching is something that is typically more difficult for leaders, especially if you're a younger leader, don't have as much experience in terms of managing and leading teams and people, and making sure that coaching is an area that you continually see an opportunity to improve, especially with remote team members. 2 reasons that coaching remotely is more complicated and more stressful as it relates to trying to coach your team is the interaction requires a lot more effort and time. And there'll be new obstacles that don't exist when you're speaking in person. You don't get the nonverbal cues when you're coaching. So it's important to remember in a coaching dialogue that it's a 2-way conversation. Make sure you're not the one doing most of the talking, right? It needs to have a equal part of team member, leader, talking about what the coaching discussion might be. Also, do homework ahead of time. Come up with some great questions to start the dialogue. Some non-presumptive questions that you can ask to get them talking about the issue. Make sure that every interaction is conscious and intentional, because communicating through technology, even if it's a video call or a Zoom call or a Skype discussion, it creates a new set of mental and social obstacles that don't exist when we speak in person. So it's important to be mindful of those barriers. And then always follow up after a coaching discussion to confirm the message, right? Make sure what was communicated was understood and accepted on both sides. Making sure that that team member basically got the message that you were trying to convey from that discussion. Rule 9, communicate in ways that work best for others rather than your own personal preference on how you communicate. So this is referencing to what's called the platinum rule for the style and method of communication. And this ties back to DISC. DISC is a behavioral assessment tool. And DISC defines, you've probably heard of the golden rule. So they've changed it to be the platinum rule. Lead others in the way that works best for them based on their DISC profile. What are their behavioral tendencies? What is the most effective way to communicate and connect with each team member based on their DISC profile? Utilize DISC tools to help you identify where your team members mesh well together, can create co-teams, and where there could be sources of challenge in behavior styles within your team. Some questions to ask, and it's important to ask your team members how they want to work with you, and using some neutral questions to get that information from them. So some good questions to ask are, how can I help you be successful? Or, I want to support you and help you stay on track. So how often would you like for us to have a one-to-one conversation? Is that weekly? Is it every two or 3 days? And allow the employee and the team member to help decide how that interaction will go and how frequently you should have a touch point on the progress they're making. Rule 10, leading successfully requires an understanding of what people are thinking, not just what they're doing. So leaders need to both see and be seen. So if we focus on how to see what's going on, it really gets down to how you gather information that you need to understand what's going on within your organization. Make sure your discovery process is broad for gathering information from the team, and it's not isolated to just a few of your favorite or top team members. So that means you're going to have to ask more people. You're going to have to scan more sources to get information, to get a more complete view of the landscape of what's going on in the team. Secondly, how do you be seen? How do you get others to get their information about and from you as the leader? So how are you going to be visible to your team? What's that frequency and comfort level of being seen? Also, be more aware of the impressions that you make as you're communicating with your team, because it's more difficult to undo bad impressions in a virtual environment. Are you visible to your team, and what are they seeing? It's important to think about what do they see from you on a daily, weekly basis? What are they hearing from you? So very quickly, I want to do another quick poll and have you answer this question. What is your greatest business challenge right now? So let me jump to that poll very quickly and launch it again. Anonymous, just select one. That's the wrong one. Let me try another one. Give me 1 second. All right. So what is your greatest business challenge? And I've listed 5 or 6 here. Is it around team? Is it time management? Are you having challenges with your systems right now and technology? Is it just strictly getting sales or identifying how to improve your profits? Could it be cash flow management, or is there something other than that that's your greatest challenge right now? So you could answer on one of these. It just get kind of a good idea of where you are today with your business. All right, we're starting to get the answers rolling in. All right, let me go ahead and share the results. It looks like we've got one sort of across the board here. One is time, systems, and sales. So it's spread across the 3 of those. So very good. Very good. Okay, thank you for responding. So let's go ahead and keep going. We're about halfway through the 19 rules. So let's jump to rule number 11. Building trust at a distance doesn't happen by accident. So remote leadership means trust is harder to build and it's more easily broken. So 3 components necessary to build high levels of trust are common purpose, which means do you and your team have the same purpose and same goals? Competence, do you believe the people that you're leading are competent? And finally, number 3, motives. Are people willing to go the extra mile for you as their leader? So some examples of that, and again, the more that we can align around these 3 components, the more trust will exist and the stronger that trust will become. Some examples of how to build trust with your remote team. Certainly in team meetings, try showcasing one person at each meeting. Let them talk about the work they're doing, the project they're on, the progress and success they've made, right? Also, make sure you share praise in public, praising your team, praising individuals, highlighting someone at each meeting. Celebrate small wins for your team. And then also delegate in public. Make sure to reflect the perception of fairness in your delegation process and your assignment of work. These will help you build trust and certainly gain credibility as a leader with your team. Rule 12, identify the leadership results that you need. Then select the communication tool to achieve those results. So for our communication to be effective and appropriate, you want to make sure you strike the right balance between the richness of your message and the scope of your message. So it's broken down in this way. Richness can include one-to-one communication, your tone and expression, body language, and word choice. Those all contribute to richness of your communication, and that becomes so important in a virtual environment because you lose so much of the other communication aspects when you're not face-to-face. And then secondly is scope. What's the scope of your communication? There's different categories. Is it very broad or is it very, very narrowed and specific? Email, newsletters, recorded message, all of these provide a broad reach in communication, but they can often lack richness of two-way communication. So it's interesting how these two aspects are almost at inverse relationship with each other. As your richness decreases with increase in your scope of communication, and vice versa. As your scope of communication narrows, it gives you the opportunity to increase the richness of that communication and the message. So be mindful of what you're trying to get across, who you're trying to get that message to, and how richly the message needs to be communicated. Rule 13, maximize a tool's capability or you'll minimize your effectiveness. So understand the technology you have and use that technology that's at your disposal, and also have your team members use the technology that's available to them. It's important to choose the right tool for the right job. Video and recorded messages adds a visual component to your communication, and is important to be able to include as much as you can the nonverbal cues in your message. Common file locations provides a permanent and accessible central repository or central warehouse to keep information, keep communication, so people can go back to it and refer back to it. Email is best used for very broad reach and recording that message and that information in the email. Webcam and video chat is probably the ultimate remote communication tool. And whenever you can, I would definitely recommend utilizing video style communication as much as possible. There's so many tools out there today with Zoom and Skype and Microsoft Teams. There's so many out, and most of them are free and can be very effective in maintaining communication. Text messaging is really mostly effective for more timely or urgent communication when you need to get individual messages to specific people and you need a response very quickly. And then telephone and conference calls, which if you look back prior to this pandemic crisis, I think most businesses, when they needed to communicate broadly, and have a meeting, it would be done over a conference call. These are definitely less effective options compared to one-to-one or group communication using video. And I think we're learning now in the new normal that video chat and webcams are becoming the new tool of choice for communicating with our teams, whether it's in a group setting or individual. Rule 14, make sure we seek feedback to best serve the outcomes, others, and ourselves. So here that 3O model is coming back again. And it's starting with getting existing evidence of feedback of what's happening with the team. Looking at files, emails, notes. What you want to do is create a discovery process. If you're having an issue or you've had a delay in a project or an activity, or something hasn't happened as you expected, take time as a leader, go through a discovery process. Don't come to your team completely clueless about the issue of what's happening. Arm yourself with some facts, some historical facts of what's happening. Arm yourself with what communication was given at the beginning in terms of what was expected. Then identify people you trust, develop a team of trusted advisors that you can communicate with to understand what's happening. And make sure you ask open-ended questions. Be open and honest, and don't be presumptive in the questions that you're asking. You're secretly trying to get feedback from the team. And have the conversations as richly as possible, which means you have to listen. You have to be patient and allow them to communicate what's happening and what's going on, giving you an explanation of a delay or a problem that's happened. Try to have the conversations over time and allow your team to prepare for those conversations. So give them warning, let them know that you're going to schedule time. Don't just call them out of the blue and go into them with a problem or issue. Allow them to prepare, come prepared with data and information and facts. So it's a very fact-based conversation. Rule 15 is, as a leader, we need to examine our own beliefs, and we need to assess what kind of self-talk we're having as leaders. Beliefs define how you lead and how well you lead. So good leaders require a relatively healthy self-image of ourselves. So here's a few warning signs that we need to watch out for in our self-talk. And this becomes even more important in a remote environment. Is certainly here, you're an idiot. That's the worst idea ever. Or I just can't do this. Another one is, I'm just a fraud, and I'm going to be exposed because I'm on this island as a virtual leader, and I don't have my team around me. So ways to address this self-talk monster that can happen is check your assumptions that you're making. Accept positive feedback as valid and as validation that you are doing what you need to and you are an effective leader. And then don't be so proud to not seek help from others. Ask for help, ask for input and feedback from both peers and from your team. Rule 16, as a leader, you have to accept you can't do it all. This gets down to delegation and using your team. You have to find a balance between being responsible to your organization and just simply taking care of yourself. So look at your organization's process and workflow. Look for areas to optimize there. Identify areas where the team can handle some activities that you're doing today. It means you're going to have to give up ownership of some activities and processes and delegate them to your team, and doing that effectively. And certainly there are good and bad ways of delegation. Study up on how to delegate to your team effectively so they take ownership and responsibility of that process, and they may surprise you and do it better than you would. So and you're better off for it. So delegate effectively and successfully to your team. Rule 17, balance your priorities to be a remarkable long-distance leader. How do we do that? Well, we have to know the difference between self-preservation and selfishness. So your values determine how you decide what is really important to you. Everyone has the same amount of time. So the question is, how are you going to use the time available and make sure you're getting the best ROI on the time you have? So time management is really choice management. So make the choice to make your time effective. And knowing your values allows you to prioritize your activities. So make sure your calendar is developed each day based on your values and the ROI, the return you're going to get for the time spent as a business owner, not as an operator, not as a technician in your business. Step out and be an owner for your business at every day for a portion of your day. Allow yourself to be the owner. And finally, Rule 18, ensure your leadership development prepares other long distance leaders. So this is development of your team. This is creating bench strength in your team. What kind of organization do you want to be? Does your culture match the vision you have? What behaviors do you expect from your long distance leaders? These are people in your team that are leading the activities they're doing, or they may have a team with them that they're leading. What skills gaps need to be addressed to help them be better leaders? And what is your plan for developing and supporting these long distance leaders? How will the organization support these remote team members? So it's interesting to remember here that development, team development, employee development should focus more on learning, not simply just training. And there's a big difference between learning and training. Learning means there is retention and application. So it's to connect the learning to the work that's going to be done. Make sure it's relevant and it's applicable. Make the learning available in different ways. There are people have different learning styles. Some may do fine with audio learning. Others require in-person or visual, video type learning. Others may prefer reading. Allow the learning and the development to be made available in different ways for your team. And then allow the learning and development to be a process. It needs to be a journey, not necessarily a destination. It should be a continuous process for your team, ongoing every day, so that they become a lifelong learner and always applying that learning in their role to make them better, making your team and your business better. And now to the final rule, rule number 19, go back to number 1. That's as simple as that. Think about leadership first, location second. So it's really getting down to the fundamentals of business leadership. We need to do the same things. We just need to do them in a different way, deploy that leadership in a different way. We are the leaders who need to lead both in our business and in our community. Our community is counting on us to be leaders. So the challenge for you is to now let's go get to leading. How do we do that? Well, to finish up, I'd challenge you to write down up to 5 ideas that you thought of from this webinar that you want to take action on today. And a question is, are you ready to develop a 90-day leadership plan? And what would that look like? So Action Coach, we would certainly encourage you to get with Action Coach and schedule an individualized 90-day planning workshop. How would you do that? Well, crisis leadership. And if you think about leading in a crisis, which is what we're all dealing with right now, there's 3 typical responses for leaders when they're in a crisis or panic situation. We call it the 3F model. They either flight, fight, or freeze. And I think all of us have probably been in one of these situations in the last month. A lot of us probably we're stuck in this freeze mode for a long time because we were in the chapter of unknown. We don't know what's happening. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's coming next. So Action Coach, and as your business coach, I will help you fight to survive the crisis by building an action plan, a game plan for you to take action upon and allow you to survive the crisis and for your business to thrive as you come out of this crisis. So what is business coaching? Just a quick and easy definition. Coaching is simply a business apprenticeship where we grow your existing business so that it more than pays for your investment in a customized business education. And that education is something you get to keep forever. And everything we educate on, we hold you accountable for applying that education into your business so that we're getting results. So how can you take action now? Well, we are offering right now a complimentary 2-hour leadership strategy review. And in this consultation meeting, what we'll do is look at your business, dig deep into your industry and business model, understand what are some of the constraints in your business today that's preventing you from growth. Certainly right now, the crisis is top of mind. So it's understanding how to survive the crisis now so your business can thrive later. What adjustments, shifts, and pivots need to be made in your business now to meet the evolving marketplace and to meet the changing needs of your target market? Then looking beyond today, what is your 3-year objective for the business? What is your vision? And what would it mean to you personally to achieve that 3-year goal, whatever that might be? We will help you put that together. And then also identify obstacles that are likely to be encountered on the way to achieving that 3-year goal. So how can you take action on that? Reach out to me. My contact information is here. I'd love to schedule that 2-hour session with you. Alternatively, if you're interested in just learning a little bit more about business coaching, we can certainly schedule a 20-minute call and I can describe from you more about the Action Coach programs around business education and business coaching and see what next steps make sense for you and your business. Certainly right now, I know there are a lot of business owners that are struggling to manage through the crisis. They're shut down. They're trying to figure out ways to innovate their product or service and be able to deliver that to their customers. We can help you with that innovation. We can help you brainstorm ideas. So I challenge you, reach out to me. Let us help you right now during this time. And I want to check to see if we have any questions at all. Feel free to type in questions. I don't see any right now. So if there's any questions, go ahead and type those in. Otherwise, I thank everybody for joining the webinar today, and I look forward to working with each of you in your businesses soon. I ask that you have a great weekend, and we will chat for now. Talk to you soon.